بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Inshallah, we'll continue our series on the fiqh of marriage, and we stopped last week in the discussion about what happens after the aqd, after the marriage contract, until a person does the walima. Today, inshallah, we'll begin discussing about the walima. And we mentioned last week about the different things that are permissible for the spouses upon the completion of the marriage contract, and some of the things that the scholars, they discourage or they advise. So now, inshallah, we begin section 6, the walima, the wedding banquet, and its ruling. So to begin with, we know after the aqd nikah, after somebody he or she, the husband and wife, once they complete the marriage contract, they are now Islamically married, and they move then to celebrate the marriage publicly, and that is called the wedding banquet, or in Arabic, al-walima. And the walima, it has ahkam, it has rulings, and it has purpose. And so first we'll begin by describing what is the meaning of the word al-walima linguistically and technically. So linguistically, the walima, it means al-ijtima'. It means a gathering or get together. Linguistically, the meaning of al-walima is al-ijtima'u. It is to gather or to come together. And this is mentioned by Ibn Manzur in his book Lisan al-Arab, volume 12, page 643. Technically, from an Islamic perspective, the scholars, they mentioned that the name or the term al-walima, when mentioned unrestrictedly, it refers to the wedding banquet, the food that is offered during the wedding, i.e. the wedding banquet. So technically, the walima is the food given on the occasion of the wedding, or what we call the wedding banquet. And this is when it's unrestricted. If it's used restrictedly, the walima can refer to any banquet. For example, a walima could refer to a banquet that someone prepares for a guest, a food prepared for one who returned from travel, food prepared for the aqiqah, etc. So when it's restricted, it can have more than that meaning. But unrestrictedly, the scholars say the walima refers to the name of the food given during the wedding. And this again was mentioned by Ibn Manzur in Lisan al-Arab, but also Ibn Qudama in Al-Mughni, volume 7, page 275. So once we understand now the walima is the food that is offered during this get-together, then the walima is an important part of the marriage process. And we're going to get to the wisdom soon. But we should also know that just because the walima signifies the food, it doesn't necessitate that's all that happens, right? It's not just we sit down and eat. We'll talk about next week what kind of entertainment is permissible in the walima. But the point is, the walima is a get-together upon the completion of the marriage contract, and it signifies that two people have gotten married, a man and a woman. In terms of its hukum, the ruling, the scholars, they differed between whether or not the walima is obligatory or is it simply recommended. Yani between wajib and mustahab. Or we could say sunnah mu'akkada, right? Is it a highly emphasizing sunnah, or is it obligatory? So there's two groups of scholars in relation to the ruling. The vast majority of our scholars held the view that the wedding banquet is simply highly recommended and not obligatory. This is the vast majority of the ulama. And they use, we're going to mention their proof shortly, but who are those scholars? From the madhahib, 3 out of the 4 madhabs hold that view. So the Ahnaf, the Hanafiya, the Shafi'iyya, the Hanabila, they all hold the view that the walima is highly recommended but not obligatory. And other scholars, besides from the 4 schools, they also hold the same view. And so that is the majority view. the second view is that it's obligatory. It's obligatory. And this is the view of the Malikiyya, right? So the Maliki scholars. Some of the Shafi'iyya, the view of the Zahiriyya, so Ibn Hazm and Dawood al-Zahiri. Imam al-San'ani also held that view, Imam al-Shawkani, Imam al-Albani, and others. And the references for all of these have been reported. So for example, if you go back to the reliable books of the different madhahib, you'll find the two views. So the scholars who say that it's highly recommended are the Hanafi scholars, as Ibn Abidin mentions in the Hashiyah, the Shafi'iyya, as Imam Nawawi mentions in Rawd al-Talibin, the Hanabila, Matalib al-Ulu al-Nuha, and lastly other scholars. So the majority say it's highly recommended. Other scholars say it's obligatory. We said the Malikiyya, the Shafi'i, some of them, the Zahiriyya, some Imam San'ani, Shawkani, Imam al-Albani of our time, and others. And so what is the evidence that they use, each group? They use actually quite similar evidences. For example, both groups of scholars, they rely upon the hadith of Abdul Rahman Ibn Auf radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, where the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to him, give a wedding banquet even if with one sheep. And so here they differ over the meaning behind that statement. The first group said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam mentioned to give a walima even if it's a sheep, suggesting that if someone has the ability to give, then he gives. And they bring other additional proof to show that if someone doesn't have, or he can give out whatever he's able to, so therefore Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is encouraging. But the other group of scholars say no, we know from usul fiqh that a command necessitates or benefits us, a command offers or it signifies a command, it signifies an obligation. Therefore Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam told Abdul Rahman Ibn Auf radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, give a wedding banquet, and give is a command, so therefore it's obligatory. And so from here we see that the side, wallahu a'lam, the evidence that indicates that it's obligatory seems to have strong evidence by way of the command. But nonetheless, because the majority held the view that it's only recommended, we can conclude that the walima is something that every newlywed, right, so a man and a woman, when they get married, they should offer the walima. And if the case is that they're not able to, we'll talk about shortly, what can be done. But obviously, as we see from the Sunnah, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the practice of the companions radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, we don't know them not to have left off the walima. In fact, one of the evidences that the second group of scholars use is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave the walima for all his wives. Although the first group of scholars, they bring a narration that suggests that maybe it's not clear that he did. But what seems to be apparent, if we're trying to practice the Sunnah, that to do the walima, because of the many blessings and wisdoms and purposes behind the walima. So even if someone holds the view that it's only highly recommended, it shouldn't be left off. For this is a Sunnah, and the side argument that it's obligatory is quite strong. Moving from there, it's important to understand the benefit. What is the wisdom, the hikmah of the walima? Why exactly does the walima exist or is legislated? And this is a good question, because as Muslims we should at all times have the proper understanding behind these different actions, because this is one way to illuminate the mahasin, the virtues, the merits of Islam, by taking a look at the wisdom or also the benefits, the thamarat, the fruits of these actions. And so if we look at the walima, what exactly is its benefits and its wisdom? And again, it's important, just as we've been doing throughout these lessons, to highlight these points so that it encourages a person to understand what's intended by it. So like all things legislated in Islam, it always has a wisdom. Allah legislates with knowledge and wisdom. The Malikiyya, for example, the Maliki scholars, they mention, amongst other scholars, that the wisdom behind the wedding banquet, the walima, is to publicize the marriage. Because the witnesses who attended the marriage, it's possible that they die. So therefore, in order to make it public and everyone can know, the deen, the Islamic legislation teaches us to popularize and to publicize the marriage. And this was mentioned in Al-Mawsu'a Al-Fiqhiyya Al-Kuwaitiyya, volume 45, page 234. Interestingly, we see that, if you remember earlier, that when we do the aqd nikah, we have two trustworthy witnesses. But in the situation or the circumstance that these two pass away, it raises a good question: how do we know these two, i.e. this man and woman, got married? If, for example, the witnesses go missing, we only have their testimony. So from that angle, also the angle that no one would doubt that these two are married, Islam teaches us to have a wedding banquet, in which the poor and the rich, the far and the near, everyone gathers, the relatives and neighbors, friends, family, etc. So that's one wisdom. The scholar Shah Waliullah Dehlawi, from the great Imam and revivalist from India, who died 1176 Hijri, Shah Waliullah Dehlawi, rahimahullah, he writes in his book Hujjatullah al-Baligha, or Hujjatullah al-Baligha, volume 2, page 130. So this is a book he wrote. It's a very interesting book, a helpful book, in which it highlights many of the mahasin and the maqasid of the sharia. So this book is very helpful, the conclusive argument of God. Right? So scholars often quote from this book due to the benefit the scholar Dehlawi, he does in trying to elucidate for the public and for the Muslims and for the non-Muslims why some of the wisdoms and some of the purposes behind our legislation in comparison to other legislations, and also in comparison to the practices of people, and how Islam has so much khair and masalih, benefits for people. In there he lists the following reasons as to why, some of the reasons as to why the walima has been legislated. And here we have to mention a note. Whatever we're mentioning here is just some indications. It's not the only wisdoms, and of course as human beings we're limited. We cannot enumerate all the blessings and the wisdoms of Allah. So some of the examples, some of the reasons why there's a walima, wedding banquet. Number one, to publicize the marriage so that there's no doubt about the lineage of the future children. So in the case that these two got married and then later on they have family, no one will come and say, well, how do we know these two are married? What if they commit zina? No, so the walima is a point of making i'lan, announcement, a notification that these two are married. Number two, the walima is there to distinguish the marriage from fornication. It's very important to distinguish the marriage from fornication. And this is in the case that if there was no walima, then some people among society don't know these two are married. And so if they find them, right, together or living together, somebody may assume that these two have committed haram. So to distinguish between halal and haram, there's the walima. And it's very important to take a look at this. Right? Obviously, this is not the discussion at the moment, but many people who they think bad about Islam and the Muslims, and they try to raise these kinds of weak arguments. And some of the arguments may be that to do with our practices of marriage or other than that. So we know in Islam, Allah prohibited a zina. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited fawahish. Allah prohibited all kinds of bad dealings. For example, like affairs and this and this. So the difference between the two is this. It's one of the differences. And we'll mention the hadith is reported authentically. Shaykh Albani authenticates in As-Sahihah, hadith number 14763. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, publicize the marriage. This is a marriage, not fornication. So here, it's clear evidence. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling us, publicizing the marriage distinguishes it from the haram, because affairs, as-sifah, is that which is hidden and kept away from people, compared to the nikah, which is open and there's no hiding because it's done in the halal way. It's very important we think about it. The halal is always open, apparent, clear, where the haram is hidden and often hidden and tucked away because it's wrong. Number three, he mentions Shah Waliullah Dehlawi, to declare to the world that this man, for the man to declare to the world that this woman he has married, specifically his wife, and that he has married her and he has made the devotion or commitment to be married to her. So in the case that someone else cannot, try to marry her, for example. Fourthly, to thank Allah for establishing the household and the benefit that comes therein. Interesting, right? Gratitude is part of our faith. So by doing the walima, you're thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for allowing this establishment of the household and the benefit of cooperation between two spouses in doing so. Fifthly, to honor the woman and her family, since the man gives a dowry and he spends from his money for his wife and her family to have this wedding done and to move in with her, and so he's spending from his money as a type of dutifulness and honor. And this is a great example to show how Islam honors the woman. Not only does the man give the dowry, the mahar, he also pays for the walima. It's on his responsibility. And why is this important? Because this is, again, dispels any doubt that Islam has come somehow in some way. Again, people who claim this are not looking at our legislation and the beautiful wisdoms. Islam has honored the woman and her family by having the man not only give the dowry but also spending from his wealth for the wedding in order to honor her and this union that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made permissible for them. Number 6, to express joy of gaining a great benefit which he has not previously gained, or which a person has not previously gained before that, i.e. you are showing happiness for having a wife and a wife having a husband, right? So this is a special benefit, special blessing of getting married, because prior to that they were not married, or maybe they were married. This could be a second marriage. And the idea is that you're thanking Allah for that. And so these are just some of the wisdoms that he mentions in his kitab Hujjatullah and Baligha. And it shows you again in Islam all these great benefits. The reason and benefit of knowing these wisdoms, some of these wisdoms and the fruits and purposes, is to encourage us to practice our Sharia with full confidence, and not to think that these actions are burdens. Unlike others who may assume that this is an additional burden and cost, because we know in Islam marriage is supposed to be easy. It shouldn't be seen that spending here is a waste, because Islam, first of all, doesn't call a man to spend more than he can. That's the first thing. And secondly, there's no contradiction between this practice of spending and honoring and having a good time and a financial burden, because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam encourages us to the best of marriages, that which is easy. And we know we're not supposed to have israf, wala tusrifu. There's no israf and extravagance. So, but the idea is that this practice is a form of honor, respect, gratitude, publicizing, clarity, and it's important then that the walima be done properly. Because if we say that one of the wisdom behind the walima is to thank Allah, then as we'll see next week inshallah, it is not permissible nor befitting that the walima have anything of haram in it, because what kind of gratitude and thankfulness does someone do for thankfulness and gratitude does someone show to Allah by doing that which is prohibited? You see, by reminding ourselves as to why these things are being done, we also see what we're not supposed to do. Some people may disobey Allah in the walima. Some families may do this and they think, oh, it's a wedding night, it's permissible now to let loose or to relax some of the rules. Forgetting that, how are we thanking Allah by doing something haram? Number one. And number two, whatever is built upon haram leads to haram. If we begin our wedding night on haram, what do you think then about the hal of the marriage, the condition of the marriage later? These is very important. The Muslim keep that in their mind. 6.2 now 6.1, the wisdom. 6.2, now what the time of the walima. So section 6.2, what's the time of the walima? When should it be done? So here the scholars, they mention that if you examine the Quran and Sunnah, you will not find any specific time that is recommended to do the walima in a clear hadith, in that the hadith, they don't discuss when a Muslim should do it, but we have examples of when it's appropriate or better to do it. So the scholars then, they mention that a person can do the walima either before consummating the marriage, or after consummating the marriage, or after the marriage contract and before the consummation. All of that's fine. So before or after consummation, or before or after moving in, as long as it is done. And so Qadi Iyad, Imam Al-Qadi Iyad, who died 544 Hijri, Qadi Iyad, he says, Rahimahullah, there is no difference of opinion that the walima does not have a definition in terms of the amount of food that needs to be given, nor the specific timing. There's no difference of opinion amongst the scholars. The walima does not have a definition amount as to how much food or what should be offered exactly, nor a specific timing that it should be done. And he mentioned this in his book Ikmal al-Mu'lim. This is explanation of Sahih Muslim, volume 4, page 588. And likewise, Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah, he mentioned that the walima can be done after consummating the marriage or before it. And this is in the Sharh Sahih Muslim, volume 9, page 222. So there's a choice here. But with that being said, what is better? Is it better to do it after consummating the marriage or before? If we look at the hadith, we see Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he would do the walima after consummating marriage, after the consummation. And the proof for that is the hadith al-Bukhari, hadith number 5466. Anas ibn Malik reports, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam became the bridegroom, i.e. the husband of Zaynab bin Jahsh radiyallahu ta'ala anha, whom he married in al-Medina. After the sun had risen high in the sky, i.e. the next day, the Prophet ﷺ invited the people to a meal, i.e. the wedding banquet. So this is hadith 5466. From this hadith, the scholars derive that Rasul ﷺ moved in, i.e. the term moving in suggests consummated the marriage with Zaynab, towards then the next day in high noon, he had the walima. And so here, this is the view of the Malikis, Maliki scholars, the Shafi'iyya, Maliki madhab, Shafi'i madhab, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, and it seems the Hanabila as well, at least some of them. They held a view then, based on this hadith, it's recommended to first consummate the marriage, and after that do the walima. This is the point. So this is the view of the Maliki madhab, the Shafi'i madhab, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, and Fatawa al-Kubra, volume 5, page 478. He likewise agrees and says this hadith indicates this, and some of the latter Hanbali scholars agreed to what he mentioned, like Imam al-Mardawi. Now, with this being said, the evidence indicates, wallahu a'lam, that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam first consummated marriage, because the walima happened the next day, not on the same day. Hafiz ibn Hajar al-Fath al-Bari, volume 9, page 231. He says that this hadith clearly shows that it's recommended to have the walima after consummation, as the Prophet ﷺ did so. And so if someone were to ask when is it recommended, then the recommendation is to do it after consummation. As for when it's permissible, it can be done before or after. Therefore, we have many cultures, like some of us, our culture here in this side of the world, where many people are accustomed to having the nikah, i.e. the aqd, the contract, and the walima on the same day. And so many of us, we find this customary, that the same day it happens. Whereas others, they do it, you find, and again, within this side of the world and many Muslim cultures, they have a different, the contract is private, and then the walima public. So both practices are fine. However, if someone wanted to do the sunnah, they first do the aqd and nikah, and after some time, they do the walima, as we'll mention soon. Another question may arise, what time of day is it good to do the walima? Nighttime or daytime? And the reason why this comes up is that some of the scholars, they discussed this, and they said that it is better to do it at night. Some argue that there is a narration, even though it is not authentic, but they said there is a narration that says that the Rasul ﷺ, he did the walima at night time. However, this narration is not authentic. And others said that it's better to do it at daytime. And the proof is the hadith I just cited earlier, hadith Zaynab, radiyallahu ta'ala anha, that she, Rasul ﷺ, when he married her, he had the walima at the daytime. Truth be told, the conclusion would be that the best time to do it is when it's suitable for everyone and easy for the people to arrive. So whether that be the daytime or the nighttime. whatever is suitable, because cultures differ and people's customs differ. With that being said, it's important to note walimas or the wedding banquet to be done excessively late, as in some cultures they do, or some people they find acceptable, very late. The walima, they may do it sometimes past midnight. Then in this case, this is not something which is recommended, because it can lead to people to missing to the Salat al-Fajr. Sheikh Abdul Muhsin Abbad, he was mentioned to him the question that nowadays sometimes the food is not placed for the walima except late at night. So if someone's invited to such a late walima, and we'll talk about the invitation later, about attending and when you can and cannot attend, or when you have to. He said, they asked him about this, and he says that it's not appropriate because most of the night or large portion of the night is gone. If you're doing it way late, like midnight, some cultures they do it. So in the likes of this, he seeks an excuse. The person himself can excuse himself and not attend and make dua for them, because it's too late, and by the time the food comes, the person would probably be in hardship. So the advice would be that if the walima is being done at night, it should be done at a reasonable time and not excessively late, because then you put people in hardship, to which then you cannot obligate them to attend. As will come later, that there are certain conditions or excuses, legislated excuses, which allow someone not to attend the walima. So the bottom line, day or night, whatever is suitable to the people. 6.3, the duration of the walima. And the scholars, they speak about now the duration, how long should the walima be. And interestingly, right, the walima doesn't have to be just one day. It can be several days. And this is something which nowadays is not very common, in that people do the walima one time and that's it. Especially in this side of the world, when the costs are very high for living. And so the scholars, they discuss now, how long should the walima be? 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah, died 256 Hijri. He writes in his Sahih chapter, the Prophet ﷺ did not set the walima as 1 day or 2 days. So what does he mean by that? Hafiz ibn Hajar said, that is, the Prophet ﷺ did not make the walima a specific time for its obligation or recommendation. There's no set time. It's not 1 day or 2 days. He ﷺ didn't tell us how long it is. So from here, the scholars, they came to some discussion about what is appropriate in timing, i.e. duration. Interestingly, there is a narration that shows the Prophet ﷺ himself, he had the walima for the duration of 3 days. Just think about that, 3 days. And this is the narration reported, I believe it's the hadith of Anas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, where it's mentioned that when the Prophet ﷺ married Safiya, he made her freedom. She was a prisoner of war, so the Prophet freed her, and he made her freedom the dowry. And then he made her walima 3 days. 3 days long. And this narration was reported by Abu Ya'la in his Musnad. Abu Ya'la in his Musnad. And is graded Hassan by Hafid ibn Hajar in Fath al-Bari, volume 9, page 151. And likewise, Imam al-Albani, rahimahullah, he graded Hassan in his kitab Adab al-Zafaf, page 146. And I believe it's in English, the book now. The Etiquette of the Marriage, excellent resource that we recommended before, and we will continue to recommend for the brothers and the sisters. Adab al-Zafaf of Shaykh al-Albani. If you have not heard about it or have not seen it, it's available now in English, both in print and PDF. Excellent resource to know how to do the wedding according to the Sunnah. So with that being said then, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam did the marriage walima for 3 days. Now, the scholars went and examined further. Can it be done longer than that? Because we said before, there's no limit. The least amount, at least it has to be 1 day or 1 moment. But can it be longer? We have evidence, yes. How about longer than 3 days? Imam al-Bukhari, he mentioned in his Sahih, in his chapter, heading, that the walima can be even 7 days long. And a whole week. And interestingly, Hafiz Ibn Hajar, then he brings the evidence to prove this point. He says there's a narration reported from Hafsa bint Sirin. May Allah have mercy upon her. So this is Muhammad bin Sirin's sister, also scholar hadith and alima, scholar narrative narrations. Rahimahullah. Hafsa bin Sirin, may Allah have mercy upon her, she said her father, Sirin, he got married and his walima was 7 days and he invited a number of companions. So Imam Bukhari, he narrates this he indicates this in his chapter heading. And Hafiz Ibn Hajar reports the narration. It's reported originally in Musannaf Ibn Abi Shaybah, hadith number 18,048. Hadith number 18,048. And it's also reported in the Musannaf of Abdul Razak and something similar in Al-Bayhaqi. However, this narration, what's apparent, Wallahu A'lam, is as da'if, it's weak. And this was the grading given by Shaykh Sa'ad al-Shathari. Shaykh Sa'ad al-Shathari, may Allah preserve him, in his authentic verification of the book, Musannaf Ibn Abi Shaybah. And he cites the weakness being a disconnect in the chain of transmission, because Hafsa, even though she's the daughter of Sirin, she was not alive at that time to witness that. She wasn't alive at the time to witness her father's walima, because he just got married. So he said that there is disconnect, because we don't know who narrated to her that. Wallahu a'lam. So with that being said, that at least we get indication that, even though if the narration has weakness, that it can be longer than 3 days. And that's what Qaadir Iyad, he says that the Malikis, his companions be the Malikis, because he was a Maliki scholar, they recommended that those who are wealthy, they should do an entire week. And this must have been at his time period. That the Maliki scholars, they suggested the one who has wealth, Allah blessed him with wealth, they should do a week-long walima. And I believe in some cultures till today, the walima is 7 days. 7 days long. So the scholars obviously, when mentioning this, and this is mentioned by this point by Qaadir Iyad, was cited by Ibn Hajar in Fath al-Bari, volume 9, page 152. Somebody may ask the question, how does that work, 7 days or 3 days long? And what's the ruling on it? The scholars, even though the hadith is there, Hassan, many of the scholars, they contested this because they used a weaker narration that said that walima is only a right on the first day. It means if somebody does a walima for 3 days, let's assume, and they invite you for the walima, you have to attend the first day if you're invited. The second day, it's recommended. The third day, you don't go, because some of this narration, which is weak, suggests that a walima for 3 days, and the third day is considered a type of showing off. So this kind of discussion came up amongst the scholars because there's a narration, but it's a weak one. So the conclusion, the bottom line conclusion, is what Hafiz Ibn Hajar, he concludes. He says, or he mentions that having the walima for 3 days is something reported, as mentioned in the hadith. And in some, what he concluded is that it is disliked to have the walima for more than 3 days unless there is no fear of any kind of commotion or any kind of commotion, hardship for the host, as well as no fear of showing off or competing with others. And if somebody fears that somebody's doing a walima for like a long period in order to show everybody I have the biggest wedding banquet ever, and to compete, this is important, then this, he says, not allowed. But if there's no fear of that, and this is something someone's doing, then if it's done in order to accommodate the different people who are coming, for example, this is the key here, because someone may say, well, how do you do 3 day long walima? You divide the people into groups. So for example, one group of people come one day. Second group of people who didn't come the last day, the first day, come the second day. Another group on the third day who didn't come the second day, like this. So he says if it's prolonging is due to a large number of people, to invite them, then this is fine. Because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we've seen that he did this and he invited different people on different days to come to eat from the food. And we can see that some of the scholars say that this can be done. For example, somebody invites the scholars on one day, family members and neighbors another day, the businessmen on another day, the poor and needy another day. So for example, he invites different people on different days. So this is what's intended. But as for someone who attended the first day, then is invited the second day, invited the third day, then no, they said this is not good. Person comes only one time. And obviously this is connected to another issue, which is that they used to do the wala'im, they used to do the walimas, the wedding banquets, in their homes. And we know typically a home cannot accommodate so many people. Unlike wedding banquets today where you can accommodate hundreds of people. And we'll get to another time. What's the ruling on these wedding banquets? And is it recommended to be using them? And we can see that even though we don't say it's haram, and the scholars don't say it's haram to use a wedding banquet, we do know that due to the nature of those banquet halls, it's not possible or feasible for someone to book it 2 days long. And very few people can do that. Versus if someone did a wedding in a home, then it's possible that they can do it for 3 days, كما فعل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So this is something to consider, to take a look at when considering the occasion. Again, the bottom line is, it all goes back to the ability and the situation of the groom, because he's going to the one who's going to pay for it and organize it, and how much he can afford and what he can do. With that being said, 6.4, what kind of food should be offered in the walima? What kind of food should be offered? So we know the walima, we said it signifies or it indicates the food of the wedding banquet, the gathering. What kind of food should be given? The scholars, they all agree, or they all mention, that it is recommended to offer food for the walima, whatever the husband can afford. Yani the food that he's offering is in accordance to what he can afford. And therefore, it's not a condition to offer slaughtered meat. Although it's recommended to offer that, as we'll see in other hadith, it is not a must. And this is the view of the jumhur, the majority of the scholars. Some even said there's ijma', there's no had, there's no bottom line. As you mentioned, Qadi Iyad, he mentioned that there's no cut-off line, how much you can offer. So according to everyone's ability. So if the husband is rich, he can offer more food and more sheep, provided there's no waste. And if he's not wealthy, then he offers whatever he can offer, and there's no blame upon him. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example, when he married Safiya, and also the hadith is a hadith of Anas as well, another hadith Anas, that shows that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he married Safiya, he offered a walima that had dates, fat, cottage cheese, and the likes. And here Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't have any meat. Another hadith says that he offered the wedding feast for one of his wives with just 2 mud, 2 handfuls full of barley. And so this is evidence that it's not a must-to-have, extravagant amounts of food, or it's not extravagant, but nice meat and etc., even though it's recommended. And the proof for its recommendation is that Rasulullah told Abdul Rahman bin Auf, when he got married, he told him, Awlim, do the walima walau bishatin, even if it's just 1 slaughtered sheep. Hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. So the fact that he told him to do the walima with the sheep indicates that it's recommended or good to offer that if you're able to. But the scholars also mentioned that because he said walau, even if it's 1, means that it could be underneath that and there's no harm, like he alayhi salatu wasalam has did. So nowadays it's common practice for people to offer meat, and a lot of it, because they want to honor their guests and the family, and one of the two couples, the couple wants to honor their friends and family and neighbors, etc. And they also want to give to the poor and needy, because the poor and needy will also attend, and this is khair, much khair comes from it, provided that there is no waste. Because if waste is happening, then that is haram, as comes in the ayah in the Quran, eat and drink and do not be extravagant. So it's very important that, and this is a sad reality, many of the weddings, so much food and luxury is given, and it goes to waste because many people don't come who are invited, and it just gets thrown out. Or sometimes it's just taken home by the host, and as long as it's not wasted, it's fine, but it should not be wasted. And that's also one of the reasons why the poor and needy should be attending, as we'll come to the leader. And it's important that they be in attendance so that they can also benefit from this joy. And there's no blame in someone, like what you just said, culturally or otherwise, if they don't offer meat. Because some people, like I said, in some cultures, there's a lot of takalluf. There's a lot of unnecessary burden. And so someone is feeling that if they didn't offer this amount and this thing, and this kind of dessert and that kind of dish, then there was not a walima. It didn't happen. And this kind of language and criticism is un-Islamic. Because Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we mentioned here, he offered a walima of dates and cottage cheese and fat, or barley bread, and he is the best of the creation and the best example for us. So no one can be criticizing somebody's walima because it's missing certain things. It's very important, because unfortunately it becomes that way, that people start competing with people. Even instead of thanking Allah for the ni'mah, they start criticizing so-and-so's wedding compared to so-and-so's wedding. And then what happens? We have to ask a serious question. Are we doing the walima to compete? To which then, if that's the intention, some of the Salaf, some of the scholars in Salaf, they didn't go to other people's weddings because they said, you people offer the food, not for feeding people, but to show off. And so that's another thing we keep in our mind. Allah bless someone with wealth and ability to offer more, and thanks Allah for it, and we should be grateful. And if someone else doesn't have that, then we still make dua for them, and we thank them for offering what they offer. 6.5, the polygyny and the walima. If someone is getting married to more than one wife, how many walimas does he do? For example, if someone were to get married to 2 wives in one day, with 2 separate contracts, can he do one walima to suffice? Here the scholars, they mention the Shafi'i madhab and the Hanabila, they both say, if someone married more than one woman with one contract or 2 contracts, then one walima is sufficient, because it fulfills the need and the purpose. However, other groups amongst the Shafi'iyya say that for each marriage is a separate walima. And this is in order to, because each wedding came with a contract and a moving in and a consummation, etc. So the scholars, they mention this in the scenario that someone has more than one wife, or is getting married to more than one wife, and it's found in Mawsu' al-Fiqh al-Kuwaitiyya, volume 45, page 250. And inshallah, we'll stop with one more point for today, and we'll continue next week about some of the other issues related to the walima, which is 6.6, and that is, what about if someone did not do the walima? Can they make it up? So, for example, if someone didn't know the walima was obligatory or recommended, or for whatever reason, let's say they're financially unable at that time to do the walima, can they do it later? So here the scholars, they discuss 2 things. One, the qada, making up the walima, and secondly, the fawat al-walima. Fawat, if someone missed it. And so the first thing we come to is that, let's assume someone did not do the walima for whatever reason. It's possible that some people can come together and they could aid them. This is permissible. So that's the first thing we need to mention. It's permissible for friends and family to come together to pitch in some money to help the person do the walima. And the proof for that is when Ali radiyallahu ta'ala anhu got married to Fatima radiyallahu ta'ala anha, Shaykh Albani, he mentioned some of these narrations in Adab al-Zafaf. Al-Zafaf, he mentioned the narration that they helped. Some of his friends and family, they pitched in to help with his walima or his nikah. So that's one. Number 2, there's a hadith in the Adab al-Mufrad of Imam al-Bukhari, hadith number 296, which mentions the hadith Jabir ibn Abdullah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. It's a hadith talking about miserliness, and then it comes to the end. It says, وَكَانَ عَمْرٌ على أسنامه في الجاهلية. There's a man, Amr bin al-Jamuh. Amr ibn al-Jamuh. And it says that وَكَانَ يُولِمُ عَنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم إِذَا تَزَوَّجَ. That in time of Jahiliyyah, Amr was one who used to worship idols in Jahiliyyah, and he's the one who arranged the wedding banquet on behalf of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he first got married. It's important. He's Amr bin al-Jamuh. He's the one who arranged the wedding banquet on behalf of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the time of Jahiliyyah when he got married to, I'm assuming it's Khadija. And this is the hadith Sahih. Shaykh al-Albani is authenticating Sahih Adab Mufrad 296. So it's possible that someone doesn't have money, or at the moment of his marriage, that friends and family can come together and help them. But let's assume they still didn't do it. The ulama mentioned first thing, if someone misses it, what does that mean to miss it? The Malik and the Shafi'i, others, they say, how long do you have until you can make up the walima, or you suppose is due on you? So some of them, like I said, the Maliki madhab and the Shafi'i madhab, they said that there's no end time. And as long as someone's alive, he can still do the walima on his behalf. So for example, like we said, he didn't have money, and time is passing, then years down the line he can do it. Because he has the ability now, and he can give. And other groups of scholars said that no, it should only be done until the person no longer is considered newlywed. What does that mean? Some of them said the walima, its time begins as soon as the wedding contract has ended, up until the end of when you're considered newlywed. And how long is that? So they said if someone is married, a virgin, then I have 7 days after the wedding, or after the marriage contract, then this is it. You're not newlywed anymore. Now you're married. And for the thayyib, 3 days. And they use the evidence, Sahih Bukhari Muslim, about if someone has multiple wives, staying 3 days with one and 7 days with the other. But in reality, that's, we can't really say that that hadith applies to this situation. So we could say that someone can make it up at the very least. But then the question now comes, should you make it up? So the first question, they said, when do you make it up? Another group said, as the scholars discuss, is your qada even allowed? First of all, should you be making it up? This all goes back to what we mentioned in the first part of today's lesson. Is the walima wajib or not? So based on that issue, the walima is wajib or not? If someone holds the walima to be wajib, then they say you have to make it up. Then you're in this conversation. But if you hold the view, like the Malikis, others who said it's not wajib to begin with, I believe we said the majority of scholars, they mentioned that it's only recommended. So they said that if it's not wajib to begin with, only recommended, then if you missed it, you missed it, no problem. And so here we can see that there's a difference of opinion there. The bottom line is that if someone wasn't able to do with the walima due to whatever situation, it's preferable that they get help from others to do it. And if they have to delay it for some time, for example, more time, and sometimes it happens a year, people may delay for 6 months, whatever it may be, that is permissible. Because Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, when he got married to Fatima, he took some time to work to make money for the walima. So there can be a duration of time. There's no problem with that. And in the case that someone takes too long, the duration extends, then it's no problem, because we said before, there's a hikam, there's wisdom, and there's maqasid, and there's purposes behind it. So therefore, even if it's delayed, the wisdom can be still, and the fruits can still be obtained. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And these 2 points I just mentioned now about making up the walima and missing it is taken from al-Mawsu' al-Fiqhiyya. Inshallah, next week we will continue from this point, and we'll talk about what kind of things happen in the walima, what is not allowed to happen there, and the condition the person invited. And this applies to everybody, right? If you're invited to walima, when do you have to go? When do you not have to go? what are the legitimate excuses into which you can excuse yourself from attending the walima? And it's very interesting because scholars mention some interesting reasons that many of us will not be familiar with that could show that you're excused. But the problem obviously is that what is the ruling on attending to begin with? That is the most important thing. And so no one should be looking for excuses to skip, but we'll talk about those things the next week, to which then we'll also move into what happens after the walima. Inshallah, and if anyone has any questions, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, we will take them. Anyone have any questions? طيب إن شاء الله. If there's no questions, we'll end with this much. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.